Operating various types of small steam boilers, and this is part 3, the Firetube boiler. Most full-size steam boilers are of the Firetube type. Steam traction engines and steam railway locomotive boilers being the most common. The boiler on screen is a Castle Steam V6 vertical boiler. And this boiler steams very well indeed. Just look how many fire tubes it has. You may be thinking, well, what's the point in having lots of fire tubes? And the answer is quite simple. It's all to do with increasing the surface area to transfer the heat from the fire to the water. This Castle Steam boiler is very well thought out and very well made. The part of the system that I'm currently pointing at is the wet header, and the clue's in the name. The wet header supplies wet steam straight from the boiler. With this Castle Steam design, the wet header has 2 pipes which supply the steam from the boiler to a superheater down the centre. And although you can't see it in this image, the superheater is really 2 tubes that go all the way down into the fire. Steam goes down one and back up the other. Then the superheated steam that's been back through the fire goes down this pipe to the main outlet. And by the time the steam gets to the outlet, it's very hot. Just to recap, 2 tubes come from the wet header into the superheater, and the output of the superheater goes to the pipe that goes to the outside world. The central coil of piping that you can see is a boiler feed water preheater. As the water's pumped into the boiler, before it goes anywhere near the boiler, it goes round these tubes, which obviously at the top of the fire tubes are very hot. This is a really good idea because it preheats the water before it gets pumped into the boiler. The safety valves are on a separate manifold, and this is supplied directly with wet steam from the boiler. This wet manifold holds the pressure gauge, the safety valves, and also has a tap to allow the use of wet steam for such things as boiler feed pumps that are made from gunmetal. There are 2 more pipes in this part of the boiler, and these both point up the chimney. One is the output from the steam blower, and the steam is also taken from the wet manifold for this, and the other pipe is a direct connection for the exhaust from your steam engine to go up the chimney and draw the fire. Looking inside the bottom part of the boiler, this is called a wet firebox. Here you can clearly see how many tubes there are, quite a lot for the size of the boiler. And you can also see the outer shell of the boiler and the inner firebox. And what does all this mean? Well, when there's a fire in the firebox, not only is the fire going up the fire tubes and the superheater flue, all around the fire is surrounded by water, in between the inner firebox and the main barrel of the boiler. However, not all model boilers with fire tubes have a wet firebox, especially the small gas-fired type. Some of these, in fact quite a lot of these, just have a lower tube plate and an upper tube plate with tubes in between and no firebox at all. This Castle V6 boiler is a dual fuel boiler. It will work on coal or gas. I prefer to run this boiler using coal, and here's the fire grate. This is an extract from a video I made quite a while back. If you look at the pressure gauge, you will see it is at full working pressure, and it's powering a Stuart 5A, and that's running at a good speed. Normally, to provide enough steam for a 5A, you would need a much bigger boiler than this, but because of the design of this boiler, it works perfectly fine. The pressure's only dropping here because I have the fire hole door open and I'm generally cleaning the fire. Once I stop messing about with the fire and close the fire hole door, the pressure soon goes up again. I think it's time to pump some more water in. This is a very small, very old gas-fired boiler, but a gas-fired boiler with a difference. At first glance it looks like a water tube boiler, but it isn't. It's a fire tube boiler. The first part of the flue tube is obviously surrounded by water, and even though this is a horizontal boiler, the principle is very similar to the vertical boiler with a wet firebox. This is a really good model boiler. It is very efficient. When I was rebuilding it a while ago, I experimented with a ceramic burner, but in the end I decided to go with a blowtorch burner. This is the one off my blowtorch in the workshop. The only problem with this burner is it's a bit too fierce and it's boiling the water through the glass in the water gauge, and this is not a good idea. Originally the boiler was fitted with a baffle, and here you can see it glowing red inside. It's just a piece of copper. The glowing baffle in front of the fire tubes made this boiler very inefficient. Here it is running a Stuart No. 4 engine, but it's pretty useless really. It's not getting anywhere near a reasonable working pressure. But this is before I rebuilt it and modified it. During the rebuild I altered the design in 3 ways. I fitted a brass ring into the entrance of the flue tube, and that stops the burner from boiling the water in the water gauge. I also fitted a very small sievert blowtorch head. Initially this takes a while to raise steam because it's a much smaller flame. But once the boiler gets to working pressure, it stays there, and I even have to turn down the blowtorch. Look, there's hardly any flame in there. This is a really good general purpose boiler. I don't know who built it, it's not a commercial item, but every part of it, including the casing, is very well made. And in this clip it's running a Stuart Sirius with no problem at all, not even on full working pressure. Plus the gas is still turned down with the tap on the gas tank. This boiler is quite interesting and somewhat different. It is called a Kingdon boiler. As you can see, it's a Firetube boiler. It also has a wet firebox. The firebox is of a lesser diameter than the main barrel of the boiler. As a full-sized item, these Kingdon type boilers were quite popular in steam launchers in Europe. I can't offer any explanation why the firebox is a lesser diameter than the top part of the boiler. Maybe it's just a style statement. This clip was taken from the video when I first looked at the boiler. All I'm doing in this clip is removing the steam fittings. I wanted to make a very small coal-fired boiler, so this was an ideal thing to use. I made a comprehensive video series about this. I like this boiler because it was quite ornate, and I made it successfully run on coal. But being realistic, a boiler of this size and coal firing in a model steamboat is a no-no. It would need constant attention, like coal-fired boilers generally do. I get various messages from time to time from people wanting to put a steam plant in their workshop. And yes, I know it can be done. I've seen the video on YouTube, but it's not something I'd want to do myself. This clip is from much later on in the series. In fact, I think it's another series where I modified it to be gas-fired. I'm using a Bix gas burner, and here I'm setting it up by altering the position of the jet in the tube. This tap on the top that I'm turning at the moment is a steam blower, which points a fine jet of steam up the chimney to draw the fire, and I'm just seeing whether it makes a difference to the gas burner, and to be fair, it made a very tiny difference to it. But really, I fitted the steam blower because originally, as I've just said, this was a coal-fired boiler. And that is about it for this episode, all about Firetube model boilers. Just to sum up, Firetube boilers are more efficient, and they really are good things. Great for model locomotives and traction engines, as well as the Castle Steam V6 vertical boiler that I showed earlier. But because the fire tubes take up space in the boiler, they actually hold less water. So the design of a Stuart Model's 504 boiler with the Babcock tubes slung underneath is still a good option. They steam very well and they hold a bit more water, so they do not need as much attention. The disadvantage of a 504 boiler is they're not very compact. They look good on their own, but they wouldn't look too good sat in the middle of your steam launch. But for generally running model steam engines, a 504 boiler is good because you do not have to feed water into it quite as frequently as you would with a Firetube boiler. Although Firetube boilers are definitely more efficient. And that's it, the end of this episode. I'd just like to say, please stay safe, stay well, thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my main Steam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back, making it unnecessary to comment that the videos are too short.